everybody to our webinar today. So this is a webinar that's hosted by Canadian Government Executive and Xerox. And our topic today is going to be digital government. So my name is Laurie Turnbull. I am an associate professor at Dalhousie University, and I'm the director of the Public Administration School there. I'm also the deputy editor for Canadian Government Executive magazine. And so in that capacity, I'm going to be kind of your host moderator for today. And so I just want to welcome everybody and thank you so much for coming, because I know we're all used to a lot of screen time and there's a lot of these going on. And so we really appreciate that you made the time today to join us for this. And I can promise you it's going to be a very, very interesting session. So digital government is obviously something that's very, very topical and top of mind for all of us these days. And I think it's fair to say it was during, previous to COVID. But now I think a lot of the trends, a lot of the things that we were talking about prior to COVID have taken on more urgency and kind of have taken on a more front seat kind of capacity as we're looking at how to rebuild and how to do government better as we move through this period and we look to, hopefully at some point a post-pandemic period. So I just want to welcome everybody, and I'm going to in a moment welcome our panel for today. But I will say, just kind of give you a bit of a rundown for today. So I'm going to introduce your panel, and then I'm going to fade away and allow the panel, obviously, to present. And then when we come back after that, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and I will pose some questions as well. And so this is, you'll be given an opportunity to participate, and I know you'll find a lot of meat to chew on in this presentation. So let's get right to it. So I am going to introduce very quickly the people on the panel today. So Eric Wolf is the product manager, public sector digital services for Xerox. So welcome, Eric. Nawal Samhat is the associate vice president for Xerox Canada. So welcome, Nawal. And Jérôme Allaire is the vice president, government, healthcare and education for Xerox Canada. Welcome, Jérôme. So with that, I am going to leave you in Eric's capable hands, and I'll let the panelists kind of pass off to one another, and then I will see everybody again in about 20 minutes time.
Great, thank you very much, Laurie. So as mentioned, challenges, right? So in today's session, we're going to be covering the challenges and opportunities that governments are facing today. We also want to talk about why they're digitizing and optimizing processes, and that is key to helping you realize your digital transformation benefits. And also, we want to cover some ways and capabilities that Xerox has to offer to help you along the way, and share some real-life customer digital stories and the projects themselves, the transformation projects and the results. And then finally, if you're ready to begin your journey, we want to share a checklist, some thoughts and ideas you might want to think about before you embark, and then, of course, a wrap-up. So let's get started. Nawal, over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As you all know, the world has really changed, and all Canadians, all of us, are facing some serious uncertainties. The one thing that hasn't really changed, it's digital transformation. But what is digital transformation? It really means everything but nothing. It's simply put, it's only improving, simplify core business processes so you can deliver an amazing customer experience. The best two companies that I can really think of that have this down pat is Uber and Amazon. And for over a decade, we all have heard about digital transformation. But most organizations, public or private, have procrastinated this digital shift, not because they don't want to do it, not intentionally in any way, shape, or form. However, due to the lack of resources, and what I mean by resources is the lack or availability of skill sets, the time, and the money. Then COVID-19 hits, and it really hit us, all of us, really, really hard. It shut down our economy, and in large partly the federal government and the provincial government. It put us all in a situation where we all are living and still dealing with an enormous amount of economy crisis, where a lot of unemployment massive unemployment insurance claims. Partly some working from home and long testing lines for the tests of COVID, long waits to get your test results back. The analogy that I can really think of, it's when you have a house and the foundation needs to be replaced, but then you keep pushing the date until it all collapses. And that's what happened to our world. We kind of collapsed. This pandemic has put an enormous amount of pressure on us, and more precisely, magnifying glasses on the government. Every single person, every Canadian is watching the news by the hour, looking for some help, some direction on how to overcome this crisis. Unfortunately, most back-end and front-end infrastructure that we have in place cannot handle the high volume of demands for these service requests. Let me think about a couple of examples here. If you have changed home and you need to have your address changed on your vehicle permit, well, here in Ontario, you will have to go and wait in line at the Service Ontario for a couple of hours until you get that vehicle permit done. What if you can do this at the comfort of your home from your couch, which a lot of us got used to this these days. But another example I can think of, if you have applied for some sort of immigration or citizenship, well, the website today is not put up to date in a regular fashion. So the information available on site is not in real life. But imagine if it was real life and you have access to an agent where you can have a chat live. And the other thing that I've seen lately is that there are some public servants that they haven't worked since March 13, not even one day. Why? Because their department and agency has not been able to enable their work from home for many different reasons. So think about it. This pandemic has really accelerated the digital shift, and it has forced everyone to adopt very quickly. Now, the digital transformation became a necessity and no longer an option. As we've seen in the headlines, where the provinces and the cities are quite aggressive about timelines to shift to digital, I commend them and I applaud them for this courage to do this very quickly. But the unfortunate part, it didn't go as smoothly as possible. So let me give you another example. The CERB program, amazing program that the government came for, and they turned around this program very quickly to support all the Canadians. How lucky are we to be Canadians? In that perspective, unfortunately, not too long after, thousands of accounts were compromised. And then the website had to shut down for a couple of days. In a nutshell, speaking with different departments and agencies and understanding the challenges of today and of the future, we believe and we understand that digitization, workflow automation, communication services are the path forward and the focus of every single day of our governments. Now, I would say Eric Wolf will explain to you a little bit more how Xerox can help you. Eric, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nawal. So you're right, a lot of headlines, a lot of great transformational projects. And so while those projects have continued, and many of the agencies can take credit for it, I think it really commands more attention, and we need to push for more transformational projects. And what we can see here is by these stats, it tells us a few key things. I'm not going to read each one, but a few of these jump out at you, right? So the first few, a third of employees say their document-based processes are ineffective, and those processes are paper-driven. So that's what I wanted to call out here. 58% of the citizen-facing processes are paper-driven. We know this for a fact, and we kind of smile as we sit back, but we understand that, governments basically consume and produce the most paper. And 46% of these back office processes are actually paper-based. So what you can gather from this is like automation is no longer nice to have. It's really a necessity. You need to digitize those paper inputs and automate those processes. And by doing that, you're going to gain speed, efficiency, savings, and ultimately satisfaction. Satisfaction for the services that you are delivering to your constituents, your citizens, the Canadians. And in fact, thanks to this survey here, we know that about 45% of this government work could be automated just by using existing technology. So that's a huge opportunity. We don't have to do anything different, just take what we already know, apply it, automate those work processes. And in fact, from our studies here, IDC, Deloitte, they tell us that 528 hours can be saved per employee. That's huge per year, just by digitizing data collection. And I'm sure that's a little bit of a conservative estimate. It's probably a lot more than that. So let's explore the process automation ideas. So how would I do that, right? How would I get on a digital roadmap? Well, there's a couple ways to do it, but Xerox has worked with governments over the years, and we found that there's a couple simple steps. And these are pretty intuitive, but they bear calling out. First of all, find the problems, right? And as I mentioned, those problems probably start with paper. So we know that's the manual process or the paper is a pain point. Then determine which ones need to be candidates for change, let's just say. And candidates for change, what do I mean by that? Well, it's too much time is involved in a particular process, too many people, too much cost, too little added value. Maybe you're just doing part of the process because that's the way it was done in the past. So take a look at those candidates for change. Then start with those inputs. This item 3 here, digitize the document and data inputs, because you can realize the downstream value if you just start by the digitization. And what I mean by downstream is putting it into a electronic content management system. And the way you get it there is you take a look at the process you have today. Is it just a repeat of data input? Or once you get it digitized, can it automatically have a streamlined flow to that electronic content management system? And probably the case is the latter. So take a look at redesigning the process. Item 4 there, not just the old process, but a new process. And connect the dots and design at the beginning with the end in mind, obviously, as they say. And so that process often could be automated through a machine. Maybe you can use robotics, maybe you can use AI, but eliminate those repetitive steps in that particular process. And as I mentioned, keep the end in mind. So what system are you going to use it in? What electronic content management system? Is it something you already have? Is it something you're going to acquire? Is it something that you need to then quickly retrieve information from, which is typically the case? And then upstream, your employees at that stage are usually going through a processing phase, an approval phase, etc. So they want those documents available on demand. In an electronic form, that's natural. And then lastly, deploy that optimized process on a secure and modern foundation. And what I mean by that is, take a look at this, take a look at it as a prototype, as a proof of concept, redesign it on paper, put it in practice, and then execute on a smaller scale, and then reiterate it. Iterate it several times till you get all the non-value added steps out of the process, and then launch it. And so ultimately, once you deploy that, now you've optimized the front end, the back end, and those components in the middle. So this is how Xerox helps drive digital transformation. We look at it holistically. Xerox from our historical past. Xerox was synonymous with paper and printing solutions, right? And printing. So today we look at it not just print inputs coming off these MFP multifunction devices, but also office docs that may actually come inbound via manual mail, right, or generated in the office, other systems in the office, or other external data points. So there's many different inbound ways to get information into the organization. And so I wanted to stress that then we also look at the outbound. And in many cases, we Xerox actually are going to say, no, let's not deliver it in paper. You can print less because your constituents, your citizens, Canadians now want it in a different form. They want it mobile. They want it on a portal. They want it in an email. So they want some sort of electronic communication. So think about how you ingest those documents, if we digitize them, how they can be presented outbound, and then maybe the communication with the citizen then becomes electronic. And so now maybe we've created a life cycle just beyond print, and now it's an electronic communication life cycle. And in the middle, let's again take a look at those workflows, automate the workflows, and then take a look at what type of electronic content management system we want to leverage. As I mentioned, maybe you don't have one, or maybe you do, but design the inputs for the optimal retrieval so that you can deliver it when you need it. So, as I mentioned, we wanted to talk about a few spotlight stories. So we're going to do that. Jérôme, over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to present today a couple of case studies where Xerox was able to bring high value and significant wins to large public sector organizations in their digital transformation. The first one is CMHC, with assisting housing for all Canadians. Xerox delivers different types of services to CMHC on the top of being a printing technology provider. From a communication perspective, we help CMHC in designing all communications, creating documents, making them easily accessible anytime for employees from our cloud-based digital hub platform. In parallel, we realize the total transformation and modernization of the mailroom by implementing capture and content services. We reorganize how people work by remapping, automating their work processes to become more efficient, productive, and we adapted to changing needs of Canadians for communications. All library here, assisted housing, HR, legal legacy have been digitized with the highest level of security and confidentiality. Inbound mail comes from Canada Post or Purolator, for example. We scan it, we input it in a cloud-based system integrated with the login system, and Canadians are notified of receipt of their requests. Outbound mail is optimized by leveraging artificial intelligence to determine the most efficient and the most cost-effective way to send the required documents, and by including a mail tracking system to improve Canadians' experience during the entire process. So this is a great example of a business process automations which provides more productivity, a full regulatory compliance, which is absolutely critical for you, an enhanced Canadians' experience, and a significant operational cost reduction. The City of Montreal case study with the account payable department digitization is another very relevant one. You can easily imagine how complex is an organization, including 33 administrative departments and dealing with 23,000 suppliers all the time. As it's often the case, account payable is a heavy labor and a paper-intensive department. The objective of the city was for sure to make sure that the department was becoming more and more efficient and productive, but more importantly, it was to improve the business relationship with the suppliers. Very paper-based and sequential work processes made the delay of payment over the time very long, and probably too long, pushing some suppliers to stop doing business with the city. Today, each of the 370,000 invoices received every year is scanned, indexed, assigned to the right budget center and the original PO, and payment is made on a timely manner. So in terms of benefits, supplier experience with the city has drastically improved. The productivity of the entire AEP department has significantly increased with the automation of the treatment process and the reduction of risk of error. From a financial perspective, we talk about a 1.6 million of savings every year just for this department, and the ability for the city to much better plan, calendarize expenses and budgets by leveraging data analytics. Now, I will pass over to you, Nawal, for a third and I think very interesting case study. Thank you.
Thank you, Jérôme. I hope you guys enjoyed these last two success stories. And another great one to share with all of you today is the Family Services Toronto, a nonprofit organization and serving a little bit over 3,500 clients per year that through various 12 programs. The Family Services Toronto have a long-lasting relationship with Xerox, and they were faced with a couple of key challenges, like probably many of us does. The first one was around the ongoing growth of needs for these services. So the client base was consistently growing. The government funds, as you can imagine, are more on the opposite side, going to a decrease. But the way they operate for the services, the funds are coming from the government. So the family services, they will, first of all, the client will pay for the service. Then the Family Services of Toronto will process the refund for these clients, but through the funds of the government. That was taking a little bit too long. It was taking between 4 days to 2 weeks. So there was a way to reduce that number of days through that refund session. And the fourth piece to the challenges was the shortage in IT services. So their IT resources was missing. So we worked in collaboration very closely. We first helped them digitize over 1 million records of paper records. Then we helped them digitize their forms because it was more paper-based, and brought it more to an e-form where it was easy to to place the service request digitally. And we helped them move to a cloud for their document management system. And last but not least, we also helped them through their adding more IT professionals to complement for the need of securing their and managing their IT infrastructure. All this was able to yield in a quantifiable numbers. We were able to help them reduce 20% overall the cost of operations and deliver an increase of productivity by 60%. We hope you have enjoyed these success stories and it made you think about how we can help you. So now I will bring it back to Eric.
Great. Thanks, Nawal. Thanks, Jérôme. I've enjoyed those success stories. So great case studies, bring a lot of value to the agencies and the citizens, the Canadians themselves. So as we wrap up today's session, I wanted to circle back with a couple key points on why it's important for governments to continue to invest in those digital transformation projects. So as we mentioned, the spotlight stories have definitely shown the benefits, but whether it's for your employees or your citizens, you'll reap a lot of benefits. Here are a few key bullets, right? We know it's driving productivity, employee productivity, and probably satisfaction along the way. Those employees are no longer burdened with some of those manual paper-based processes, and maybe there's an opportunity to learn new skills as you've now created a digital transformation with a different work process and different systems. Streamline business processes. Certainly that's going to drive the productivity and the benefits to the organization themselves. And typically along the way, you're dealing with some sort of regulatory compliance. Maybe you need to keep the paper, maybe you don't need to keep the paper, but certainly your process steps probably are dictated by regulatory compliance. You have to file this here, you have to file that there, you have to do a communication downstream to certain individuals, you have to keep an audit trail of everything that's transpired. So certainly these digital transformation projects have the pieces of software and business processes that'll drive all those benefits and audit trails. And ultimately, it'll result in a better Canadian experience. So as we wrap up, I promised sort of a checklist, right? So we want to understand if the digital transformation is going to be successful. And in order to do that, we have to plan it out. So think about a couple key questions. Are the communications with Canadians relevant and targeted? Are they one-to-one? Certainly this will, answering that will yield a better benefit in the end. Also, do you have tons of filing cabinets, stored information? Of course you do. There's a lot of paper hanging around the office. You need to be able to get rid of that paper, digitize it, automate it, and streamline those business processes. And what about the images? Even if you did have a partial automated process with digital images, can you find that information easily when you need it? And most likely, as I said, you probably do have a hybrid environment. You have your filing cabinets, you have your offsite storage, you have people working remote, maybe they're working from home, maybe they're working in the office. And then maybe you have an electronic document management system, or maybe you don't. So take a look at your entire organization and determine what type of solution you're going to need. As I mentioned previously, regulatory compliance, right? Retaining paper, doing the authorization, required communications, etc. So jot the answers down to those questions. And then do you have an electronic document management system that meets your needs, the needs above, not only just the storage, but meeting the regulatory compliance? So I think answering these questions will better prepare you for the digital transformation, and certainly if you don't ask them and you talk to Xerox, we'll be asking them for you. So, Nawal, do you want to wrap up for us?
Thank you so much, Eric. I hope everyone enjoyed the session today and you see how Xerox can help you from a very secure and agile and scalable approach. We look forward to continue our digital conversations. And if you have any questions or any areas that you want to explore, please feel free to reach out to Jérôme or myself. And for more information, we have some information on the website right here listed. Now over to you, Lori. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Jérôme and Nawal and Eric. That was wonderful. And I really appreciate the examples. Like, it's really helpful, I think, when you're talking about a concept like digital government and digital transformation that is complex and that has a lot of facets. It's really helpful to see an example of how it was carried out somewhere. And I think often too, we tend to focus sometimes on the Ottawa examples, the federal examples, and we don't sometimes get the same exposure to municipal examples. So I really appreciate that you brought that case study forward, because we're always interested to learn best practices from jurisdictions and get a better sense of what other people are doing. So at this point, I would like to just remind audience members and attendees that you do have a Q&A function in Teams, and I've put a little announcement up there that if people want to pose questions, you can drop them into the question and answer feature, and if there's time, I will try to pick as many of those questions as I can so that we can get some back and forth between audience members and the panel, and so that it's helpful to the panelists to know what you're thinking and what kind of questions arose to you as the presentation went on. But for now, I'm going to pose a question to any or all of the panelists. My concern is about privacy regulations. And so I'm not sure if I'm asking this question out of left field or what, but I have been told that some of the things that are possible in terms of digitization, in terms of data compilation and managing data and things like that on the private sector side are not as possible on the public sector side because of regulations that have to be observed with respect to privacy. And so I'm not sure if you can comment. I would love for you to comment on that reality, if that exists, and even, if there are differences in terms of jurisdictions, if Canada poses some, has some privacy requirements that maybe are not kind of applicable in other countries? Like, how do we kind of marry that digitization with requirements with respect to privacy?
I could take this one on. So thank you, Lori, for the question. If you think about it, data today is practically everywhere. Everybody knows about everything, especially when you have the Internet of Things. When you go home, how many devices are on? That means everybody's watching, so everybody knows. Yes, the government, when it comes to Canada, the government is a little bit more sensitive, very fragile. We're not as open when it comes to data privacy. However, the situation right now is that you have to treat this with very high delicacy. So every approach that we take, if I can only talk about what Xerox do from a security perspective and confidentiality perspective, when we approach digital transformation, we approach it in a very comprehensive, secure manner. We have specific protocols, and we also have the credentials that support the handling of data sensitivity and data confidentiality. So I'm not really worried, because today it's important that we make that hop and allow people to do what needs to be done. You cannot just ask for customer experience and having no access to data. They don't marry together. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thanks very much for that. And yeah, it's something that has kind of come up a couple of times. And so I guess it's just sort of part of the overall suite of things that we're thinking about when we think about digital transformation. I also wanted to raise the issue, and this came up a bit in the presentation, that when different government departments and government entities are thinking about digital transformation, they may be at very different stages of that, right? And have different exposure to it, different readiness, that kind of thing. And even when government departments and orders of government, whether it's federal, provincial, territorial, when they're interacting with one another, they may have different capacities and different, they may be farther down the path of digitization than a colleague, than a sister department. And so I wonder if you could speak to how we manage those differences, and whether there are goals to keep in mind, regardless of where you are on that path.
Sure, Lori, this is Eric. So I can comment a little bit on that. There's a couple approaches. I think the one approach we're going to recommend is going to be near and dear to the particular agency, is take the business critical processes. So focus on those business critical processes, and they may be related to delivering the citizen or Canadian services, which most likely they are. We talked about unemployment, so take that as an example. That is a very business critical process for both the agency and the citizens alike. So focus on that. And we've had a number of those engagements. And then when taking a look at that particular business process, start at the beginning, because digitizing the inputs at the beginning of that process will then will enable you to yield results all the way upstream. If you remember that one graphic that shows the beginning to the output, the input to the output. So if you digitize it at the beginning, then you have the opportunity to use it in a number of different ways. And also I would say number 2 in that case would be automate that work stream. Don't just use the same old leftover work stream. You want to automate it, reduce the repetitive tasks, and streamline it. So then you really are driving the benefits of the digitization, the employee satisfaction, the streamline of the process for the organization, and then in the end, like I said, a better citizen experience. So those 2 things, focus on the business critical items, and then digitize and streamline and automate those processes. I hope that helps.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thanks a lot, Eric. We've got a question from the audience. This is a great question. How are you supporting remote workers in the government space? That's a great question, as so much of the public service is migrating its work online.
Sorry, you want to go, Eric?
Go ahead, Nawal.
Maybe you can complement mine then.
There you go.
So, I mean, remote worker, what it is at the end of the day is how do you access information? So there are easy ways. There are information that you can access from anywhere. It doesn't matter, but there are certain things that you cannot access regardless of you're home or not home, because the government will not allow that to step out of that particular site. So for home workers, we enable them through different technologies. So if they haven't done the digitization, we can help them digitize the information so they can have access to it remotely in the cloud. And the other piece to that is we have also access to technology that allows you to use a multifunctional device at home, where you can leverage that device because it's connected to the cloud through almost like using an iPad, sharing iPad, so we can have multiple apps directly downloaded on that printer. So it really goes back to how the government is set up, what information are they allowing outside and inside, and the classification of this information will varies from one department to another. Eric, please feel free to compliment if I missed something. Pretty much, I most probably missed something.
No, excellent answer. I mean, we can always build on that, but I think that's a great answer. And I would just say, you know, technologies today, we've had the experience working in governments in Canada and the US and in Europe. So we're very familiar with the particular requirements in those governments. So it may be a VPN requirement, or it may be a data security requirement. And so we take those all in consideration when we're building a solution. Obviously, a remote worker is going to be enabled via a cloud solution. But as you know, it is challenging with governments to get them to adopt a cloud solution because of the fears that are in today's society of the ability to penetrate those cloud solutions. So we take all of the above into consideration.
Okay, thanks very much. Another question for the audience. Do you support automation technologies such as robotic process automation?
Yeah, so as the product manager, I'll just state this, and then we can have Nawal and Jérôme comment. Xerox does have an RPA solution, something that we have designed in-house, and we complement with other third-party solutions. RPA is great. I think, it was just a matter of maturity, and it needed to come of age, because RPA has been around for a while, but we see now both government and commercial entities embracing RPA. Because if you're from my generation, you would build a point-to-point solution. It would take an army to do it. It would take $500,000. It would take 18 months, and then maybe you could measure the benefits when you're done. RPA is not like that at all. RPA, as you know, very lightweight. You can build a quick solution through repetitive process steps in a matter of weeks, and you can measure the benefits immediately. And now it's becoming widely adopted. It's no longer just a poor man's point-to-point integration. It is now something we use in a lot of solutions. Great question.
Okay, I don't want to cut anybody off. Do others want to respond to that, or we do have other questions, so I can move on?
No, you can move on.
Okay. So this is I love this question. Where do municipal governments start with automation, and what do you recommend?
I think where you can start is if you go back to the slide where we showed you the step-by-step process how you go from identifying where a lot of print or a lot of paper, lots of manual processes are happening in that specific area. It becomes the first candidate of change because you can start working on that particular area and see a quick turnaround and the fruits of your work around it very quickly. And that particular area where you have improved and you have seen the benefits from it, you can scale it up and bring it to the other sections of your departments. For example, where the City of Montreal, they started with the accounts payable. Some others, they could flag the HR department, example for onboarding and offboarding, and you can look at the legal departments where there's heavy amount of paper. So when you follow these two main areas, well, three things that you have to consider. Is there a lot of still paper-based or just images? Even images of PDF is not good enough. It looks like almost like paper because you're after the content and not the document and not the paper itself. The second piece to that you're looking at, are you having to put a lot of resources at it? So there's too much manual work. And three, is there requirements around security and confidentiality for the data that you're working with? That three mixture together are a great combination for you to start considering an area to explore. Anything else, Jérôme or Eric?
No, just to add on this, and I agree with you, Nawal. Definitely some spaces or segments, the organization where you can get some quick wins and simple, to put together. So typically AP departments, HR departments, we talk here about not so complicated processes, and versus, for example, racing a total communication process with lots of interactions with the Canadians. So typically this kind of process could be very complex to handle and to rethink. But definitely the example of AP and HR departments are some areas where you can get some very quick wins with significant impact, for sure.
Thanks very much. There's another great question from the audience. How do you deal with siloed or unstructured data when you are trying to automate? We have a lot of data that is not being shared across departments. That's a great question.
So I think that's a very good point because we are still seeing this data siloed in between departments. The idea here is you need to understand what the data is. Is it about like what level of classification it is about? You need to understand what is the implication of having to share this data with others. So because today there is what we call the document management system that exists, and you can have it in cloud and put an enormous amount of regulatory and parameters around it for security levels, and you can provide the level of access to the department that you're dealing with. They can see one view and the others can see a complete different view. So from that perspective, I think, so that's one, but at the end of the day, I think more and more we're seeing openness and the importance of people working in collaboration together and having to share the data responsibly between each other. And as we all know, the world did not get built overnight just by one person. It's through the amount of collaboration and through the ecosystem that we have built together. So I think we are all very conscious of that as long as everyone treats the data responsibly. Any add-ons from my team?
Yeah, so the Xerox. So I will say that Xerox has a number of solutions in which we consider that siloed information. We take a look at the beginning, if we digitize it, it becomes scanned, right? And then we take a look at, what's the most appropriate way to provide for indexing and categorization of data. So we do have a relatively off-the-shelf solution that we've created our DocuShare solution, and it has the ability to index and categorize that data and put it in its repository, and then present it over the web to or internal or external to the agencies or the citizens themselves, depending on how you want to solution it. So we have the basic go-in recommendations for indexing and categorization, and then we'll work with agencies to determine other ways to do that would meet their requirements. So we have had the opportunity to work with a number of different governments, so we have some experience we can draw upon and make those recommendations.
Okay, I think I am going to thank very enthusiastically our panel for being with us today and for sharing this information. This has been really, really informative, and I think again, like to be able to take a concept like this that is so multifaceted and complex and be able to put it in operational terms so that we can understand a bit better how to get where we're going. That's really, really valuable. So Eric and Nawal and Jérôme, I just want to thank you very much on behalf of everybody here for participating today. There was a question in from the audience about whether or not the recording will be available. So it will be available to CGE subscribers on demand at a later point. And so with that, I think we're going to close. And again, just thank you very much from Xerox and from CGE for participating in this event today. And we will be in touch with you for other events that we organize like this. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you.